UFO. We were shot at in Mexico, and we had to evacuate our fieldwork site. So she got so angry and frustrated. She didn't think it was funny. She shouted an expletive deleted, "Stop your goddamn blankety blank ET tricks." Just like that, the lock stopped going up and down, and she could get into her vehicle.
If you like today's content, please like, subscribe, comment down below, and of course, you can find the video interview on youtube.com/paranormalpop. Today's episode is brought to you by Alien Coffee Bean, bringing you kindness and coffee. Welcome back to this edition of Coffee and UFOs. This is episode 31, and my guest is Dr. Joseph Burkes, MD. Dr. Burkes, welcome to Coffee and UFOs.
Nice to be back.
All right, cheers. Yes, Dr. Burkes, for those who don't know, has been on the Paranormal Now podcast on multiple occasions, and gosh, it's been probably about a year and a half, I think, since we last chatted. So I'll get to the first question, then we'll talk a little bit about your history with human-initiated contact. Was it human-initiated extraterrestrial contact?
No, human-initiated contact event. Yes.
Event.
Nice.
Okay.
Right.
Human-initiated contact event, akin to CE5,
Yes.
as most people might know it. Okay. First question is, have you seen a UFO?
Well, I was a team leader for a contact team back in the 1990s, and we used the protocols that were put forward by the CE5 initiative, and we had immediate results. So I've seen multiple UFOs in the course of field work during those 5 years, 1992 and 1997. Following that, I've had one or two sightings, but nothing as dramatic as when I was actively trying to attract the phenomena.
Right. And so you're not actively attracting the phenomena?
I'm in the 8th decade of life. I retired from medicine about 7 years ago, and field work, as any contact worker, volunteer worker would tell you, it's a lot of effort. All night vigils, top of mountainsides, cold weather. It's really a younger person's endeavor. So I haven't been inviting the phenomena. There's sort of high strangeness that continues to occur in my life in telling me that the intelligence behind the phenomena is still manifesting around me. And as I like to say, once you join the contact underground, you'll never be lonely again because they're always there.
When you say they, you mean other contactees or
the UFO phenomena, the intelligence behind the phenomena. I prefer the term UFO or UAP intelligences because in the course of doing field work and reading and thinking about the subject quite a bit for the last 30 years, the extraterrestrial hypothesis is just that. It's not a certainty. And it's a great mystery as to what the origin of these intelligences are. So I prefer to leave it open and call it UAP intelligence.
Okay. And we touched on this before we got started. Why the name Human-Initiated Contact Event? Why that title?
Well, first of all, the title explains what it is. The advantage over CE5 is that we have no association with the CSETI organization. And when Dr. Greer set up the CE5 initiative, he wanted to fit into the scientific paradigm that was put forward by two professional scientists, J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée. So they have, close encounters of the first kind, second kind, third kind.
Right, yeah.
And what I've learned from studying the phenomena, interacting with it directly, and I've had 2 episodes of missing time, which are quite dramatic. What I've found is that the intelligence behind the phenomena makes it pretty much impossible to apply the scientific method. After all, in the scientific method, the scientist or the investigator gets to set up certain parameters, controlled conditions. And the ones who are controlling the conditions are not the investigators in this phenomena, but the intelligence itself. So the idea of having reproducibility and the assumptions of science that the laws of nature are fixed throughout the universe, it doesn't really apply to an intelligence, as Jacques Vallée has pointed out, can manipulate space-time. So the intelligence behind the phenomena is likely more intelligent than any scientist who would choose to try to study it with a scientific method.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't want to interact with you, they won't. If they do, they choose the conditions. So
Yeah.
trying to fit into a sort of scientific paradigm really doesn't work so well. And
I think we
that's
can
why
apply it. Yeah,
I
I think we
prefer
can
the
apply that
PC
to
part.
paranormal experiences too, right? Whether it be, let's say, ghosts. The ghost, if it is a sentient of some kind, how do you do repeatability if it has its own free will?
Well, you can investigate it, but not as necessarily as a scientist, but more as a criminologist or a counterintelligence officer, where
Mm-hmm.
you set up conditions to interact with the understanding that you're not necessarily controlling the phenomena, but you're able to make observations by using certain protocols. But the idea that science is going to solve this, at least
Mm-hmm.
materialist science, I think is mistaken. If we're going to approach this, we're going to have to develop a whole new type of science based on consciousness, where the materialist assumption that matter and energy are the building blocks of nature are going to have to be abandoned, and we're going to have to adopt an idealistic point of view. Idealist meaning mind or consciousness is primary, and that is the wellspring of creation rather than matter and energy.
So beyond matter and energy is mind, almost
Yes,
like another element of the universe or
it,
another
it,
force.
it's not an element. It's all that there is, and all matter and energy is derived from mind
I
and
see. So it's
consciousness.
it's the source or the substrate. Is that
That's
another
right.
way of? Okay.
That's right. And you want to
Yeah.
call it God, you want to call it universal consciousness.
Yeah.
But one of the things that struck me as, well, very sobering was when, as a writer with Preston Dennett, who is a UFO author,
Mm-hmm.
we wrote chapter 6 in the book Beyond UFOs. And what we studied were the responses of people to the free experiencer study, which was a very large, comprehensive, qualitative and quantitative study that had over 600 questions and
Mm-hmm.
over 4,000 contact experiences participated in it. Several of the questions asked the self-declared contact experiencers who filled out this questionnaire, have you or anyone in your family had a healing associated, a medical healing associated with UAP intelligence?
Mm-hmm.
Um, of the 1,500 people who answer that question, half, about 750, said yes. So their medical healings are a constant part of the phenomenon. And what
Right.
I discovered when I did interviews of many of the people who had claims of contact healings, that the intelligence behind the phenomena was able to do astounding repairs in very short period of time, which indicated to me that the healing was not necessarily done at the level of matter, but at the
Mm-hmm.
level of mind, and a kind of psychokinetic power that could rearrange the tissues and the disease parts of the contact experiences.
And as
So,
a doctor, that must be extraordinarily appealing to you.
well, I was very gratified to know that such capability exists, but it undermined the confidence I've had in all my medical training because, for example, a gentleman who was a retired DEA agent
Mm-hmm.
had went to his doctor, and he was found on chest X-ray of a mass the size of his fist. He had a previous history of cancer, and yet he was asymptomatic with his right lung mass. The clinical setting was, this is 99% cancer. He went to the hospital. He was getting a repeat X-ray, and while he was in the X-ray suite, and this was a person who was a long-standing contact experiencer, he had had many uh, what you would call CE3s and 4s. While he was waiting to enter the hospital where further diagnostic tests, his body started shaking violently, and the curtain that separated him from his wife in the X-ray suite was moving in a kind of energetic sine wave pattern. He started shouting in Spanish, his native tongue, Ellos están aquí, they're here, meaning the aliens were here. He then said, they've cured me. And in less than a minute, he was cured. They repeated the chest x-ray, and the mass that was in his lung was now gone. They, they did this within 30 seconds to a minute. Well, there's no way that materialist science can explain that. But if the so-called ETs dwell in a non-material realm where mind and consciousness rules, using that psychokinetic powers that they have, they could rearrange the tissues of his lung and cure him in seconds of our time. So this is a kind of astounding capability,
Oh God,
which
yeah.
makes applying materialist science to the phenomena less than useful.
You know, this is all about consciousness in the end. It seems that this sort of connection and a spiritual element to this as well. Uh, Whether you call it human initiated contact event or CE5, I mean, the term, it's not like something that's copyrighted, right? I mean, it's kind of an open ended concept.
There is no copyright on consciousness,
There you go. Or contact, right? I mean,
for sure.
yeah. And so, how does one stumble upon a CE5 experience? Like, how does one decide to go, you know what?
Yeah, in
Go
the
ahead.
Contact
Yeah.
Underground, which is the loose network of contact experiencers that I've worked with for the last 30 years,
Yeah.
there are dozens of teams all over the world. Many of them go by CE5, but
Hmm.
there are also networks of experiencers who are doing contact work even before the CE5 initiative was started in 1990. I'm talking about Mission Rama. And I had the privilege to work with them over the last 25 years. And I've had contact experiences working with the Rama, which is a Peruvian network that got started in 1974 in Lima. And the prominent contact worker there was Sixto Pascuals. So you can go to England and you'll find teams Germany, Canada, the United States, Australia.
Right. But what if you're by yourself? I mean, is that something that you can initiate
Yes,
on your
yes,
own?
yes, you can, but you're going to have to do it. It's going to take a certain amount of mental and spiritual work to do so.
Hmm.
You can go on something called Contact Hub, and there are instructions, or on Facebook to any one of the many CE5 working group sites. On Contact Hub, you can find books which are in Spanish and German and English, which actually describe how you can initiate your own CE5. So the material is out there. There's books, training manuals. The CSETI director, who I haven't spoken to in 25 years, Dr. Stephen Greer, he has numerous videos which you can look at and give the basic approach, which usually involves meditation,
Hmm.
thought projection, and assuming a posture of cooperation and requesting the intelligence to manifest itself. In my experience, almost everybody who has had a bona fide sighting of a UFO has,
Hmm.
without whether they know it or not, a consciousness link between them and the intelligence behind the phenomena. So if anyone's had a sighting and they wanted, I'm not just talking about mistaking the Goodyear blimp or the planet Venus,
Right.
but
Right.
a bona fide anomalous structured craft or some
Hmm.
incredible nocturnal light that defies our understanding of physics.
Hmm.
If anyone who's had a sighting likely has a pre-existing consciousness link, and if they want to go ahead and do contact work, I would say there's a high probability they'll be successful.
Well, if this is all about consciousness, how do we know it's not ourselves?
Well, there's also a physical component, and consciousness. I mentioned the Alberto, the DE agent who was physically cured.
Hmm.
Uh, there was definitely manifestations of energy in terms of the healing effect that suddenly caused him to shake violently, caused the screen to move up and down, and he was aware of the presence of the others. we call them extraterrestres. So,
Hmm.
I mean, you've got numerous contact experiences where people are removed from their environment, like um, the most famous of which was in Snowflake, Arizona. I'm blocking on Fire in
Travis
the Sky, Travis
Travis
Walton.
one. Mhm.
Now, Travis Walton, his mind did not manifest a UFO in a clearing that hit him with an energy beam, lifted him up while five or six of his comrades were looking, and then
Right.
removed his mind didn't remove him from the environment. So it's not just consciousness, there's
Hmm.
clear physical components.
Well,
It's not mental, it's not physical, it's both.
um, David Halprin, who I love, Mick West, was a great guest recently on Paranormal Now. Both skeptics, um, and Mick West, he's a lot of his debunking is legit, and I appreciate some of the work that he does because how many videos do we see that really are just misinterpreted, things in the sky and cellophane balloons that are quite obviously balloons, but people hype it up and they want to make it into something it's not. I get that. But then you have complex cases, right? And I was thinking about this after our interview. Um, Avi Loeb, Harvard professor, astrophysicist, wrote the book Extraterrestrial, right? And in the book, his thesis is that Oumuamua, this off-world, interstellar object,
Yes.
scientists determined it's an asteroid. Um, all the math, all the analyzations, whether it's the reflection of the object, the trajectory, the change in trajectory, uh, all these. I think there are six factors altogether. He said if you add one of those factors, then I can say I don't know, but two, three, four, five, and then you have six highly improbable factors. When you combine six highly improbable factors, that becomes a magnitude more. I don't know to what power of improbability it gets to the point where it's like this is absurd to even say that this is just an asteroid passing by. I think that there's a certain approach to cases like the Travis Walton case where you can't just pick apart one piece of the evidence, right? You have to look at the accumulated evidence and look at the complexity and say, what are the odds that all of these factors are occurring around this event and you have all these eyewitnesses at the same time? Um, when you're doing when you're contacting whatever these intelligences are, how do you, for yourself, know that it's a real experience, that what you're seeing in the sky is indeed this consciousness?
Well, multiple witnesses can corroborate your sighting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, if you're a contact team leader, as I was, on two occasions while I was meditating,
Mm-hmm.
I was given the information in October of 1993. While at Joshua Tree National Monument, at the level of knowledge, I knew that one UFO was going to show up at 2 a.m. and appear in the Northwest.
Mm-hmm.
I then told my contact I was prepared to receive this sort
So,
of information.
mm-hmm.
I told my team, yes, we're going to have a sighting at 2 a.m. Wake me up 10 minutes to 2 because I was working a lot of overnights as an ER doctor at the time, needed
Yeah.
my rest. Sure enough, at 2 a.m. in Joshua Tree National Monument in the Northwest, one glowing red UFO appeared. It flew by us silently
Yeah.
and then accelerated and shot across the desert to the east.
I
Well,
have had similar experience, but on psychedelic.
we were using meditation. So we had a UFO sighting. I was given a heads up. That's, to me, establishes the high probability that was bona fide information. It was communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so this happened again the following July in Topanga State Park,
Mm-hmm.
where again I was given a heads up and the information was accurate. So
Yeah.
here you have a very specific example of corroboration with a mental message that presaged the actual event. You can't get better than that as far as I'm concerned.
No. Have you ever experienced mental telepathy with another human?
Well, sure, but I mean, I've been married to my wife for almost 50 years, And when I was in medical school,
Yeah.
I got telepathic communication from her. Um,
We do too. Yeah.
so this is very common,
Hmm.
but it's more unsettling when it comes from an unknown source, presumably UFO
Yeah.
intelligence. And be careful what you ask for, because in our
Mm.
society, because of the stigma attached to mental communication, people are going to think if you're hearing voices or having communication extraterrestrials, showing manifestations of schizophrenia and having
Hmm.
auditory hallucinations. So you have to be mentally prepared to have these kind of interactions. And a big part of preparation for contact work is to get into a frame of mind of
Hmm.
peace, cooperation, so that when the communication does occur, it doesn't frighten you.
Yeah. So, is there anything to be frightened of in actuality?
Well, all in the 23 years of contact work that I did
Yeah.
till I stopped doing field work about 7 years ago. Never has anyone on my team been frightened, or I should say, deliberately frightened or hurt by the
Hmm.
intelligence behind the phenomena. Um, the only danger we've faced is human, which was considerable.
Mm.
We were shot at in Mexico, and we had to evacuate our fieldwork site at the base of Popocatépetl volcano. These were humans who were shooting at us.
What?
So
Why were they
where did
shooting?
this come from? Our teams have been under surveillance by people from, I assume, from military intelligence, and there's a whole explanation of why contact teams are under surveillance. It
So
was
it
very,
was a. I'm sorry. Was it
very
a deterrent act to shoot at you, or?
I would assume we were on their land, and they wanted us to get the hell off their land. Yeah.
Uh-huh. The government or just the
Well, these were
landowners?
probably some Mexican farmers in
I see.
1993, but
Okay.
the surveillance that has occurred was likely represented security officers from either the local base
Hmm.
or, in the case when we did field work in the Santa Susana Pass, we were near the Department of Energy site, where actually there had been an act of sabotage. One of my patients described seeing a UFO that apparently had cut a large chunk out of a pipe that was supplying labs at the Department of Energy site in the Santa Susana Pass.
Wow.
This was back in around 1990.
Yeah.
When we were doing contact work in the Santa Susana Pass and we were trying to attract the phenomena, it turns out at the time we didn't know it, but that on one occasion in the not too distant past, a UFO had actually carried out what appeared to be sabotage at the base. So
Do
you can see why our teams would be under surveillance under those kind of circumstances.
yeah. Do these consciousnesses, whatever they are, do they have a sense of humor at all?
Absolutely.
Have you
And
ever? What have you experienced that
oh
gives
my
you that?
gosh,
Yeah.
when we were in the it's called Robeson Mining World in 1993, we
Hmm.
had a high strangeness galore. And one of the contact workers was a respiratory therapist, Shirley Jones. She had an Astrovan that had doors that would open on remote. Well, we're having um, very strange phenomena occurring where, like, we hear sounds of people or animals moving towards us through the brush. But when we look and shine lights, there's nobody there. But the sound of beings approaching us
Hmm.
were present. So it was a kind of auditory hallucination that they induced that simulated people moving towards us. And one pair of contact workers, when this happened to them in a very isolated setting, they became alarmed and they actually said, "Stop, don't keep coming closer, you're frightening us." So the sounds that were approaching them
Hmm.
stopped. And then after they got their courage, they said, okay. And these that were coming from multiple directions, in front of them, to the
Sure. Sure.
right, to the left. So I think they said they identified 8 different sources of these sounds that were approaching them. They said, okay, one of you can come forward. And sure enough, invisible footsteps, you could hear the sound moving through the brush. They said, okay, that's close enough. Please stop. Well, at the same field work session,
Yeah.
Shirley Jones wanted to get into her Astro van. She went to her Astro van, and instead of responding to a remote, all the remotes were jumping up and down around the car, up and down, up and down. She couldn't get in. So she said, I've got an idea. I'll put my key into the lock and override the remote control. But the lock on her vehicle would not accept the key. They had put some kind of energy that prevented the key from moving into the lock. So she got so angry and frustrated. She didn't think it was funny. She shouted an expletive deleted, stop your goddamn blankety blank ET tricks. Just like that, the lock stopped going up and down and she could get into her vehicle. So these are the kind of high strangeness events that
Trickster kind of.
definitely show a sense of
Yeah.
humor.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a twisted sense of humor, but
Yeah,
a sense of humor nonetheless.
right.
Yeah. Um, okay, so we'll wrap up here real quick. Speed round. Have you ever seen a cryptid?
No,
Have you ever seen a ghost?
I have not. I've had missing time twice, and once in the course of field work.
Interesting. Okay. And you've seen a UFO? Mul-
Dozens,
Dozens.
dozens.
Have you seen the physical craft or just something in the distance?
Well, in Mexico, the triangle is 300 feet across, blocked out the stars and approached us. It was less than 300 yards from our position, and it simulated a landing with putting on forward lights. That was a structured craft. That was not an anomalous light in the sky. It was gigantic.
You can see the texture of the craft.
I couldn't see the texture, it was at night, but we could see the three lights on the apices of the triangle, and underneath was a red light, and it signaled at us. We flashed once, it flashed back once. Two flashes from us, two
Hmm.
flashes back. So we had a kind of photon talk, and we established some primitive communication that way.
Yeah, so it wasn't like a formation of helicopters or.
No, no, this thing was totally silent. It was moving less than 15 miles an hour.
Hmm.
And we were, like I say, we were probably less than 200 yards from it. It was gigantic, and we could see the triangular shape. It
Yeah.
just, it was there.
All right, Joseph, if you can leave us with some words of wisdom,
Always,
what would
I,
it
I
be?
would like to say that if you're practicing human initiated contact event and a UFO shows up, don't just stand there with your mouth open. If you have a flashlight, signal at it, or in your mind, say, if you are what I think you are, move to the left, move to the right. And if it does, then that's not the Mexican Air Force on maneuvers or the Goodyear blimp. They don't have telepathy.
Gotcha. It's you've taken all this with like in such good stride. I think because you've been doing this for a long time. Oftentimes when people say be careful what you ask for, like you said, or be careful investigating. That's because it's a warning of negative things or side effects unexpected that could be harmful. But it's more often than not, I hear positive things. Why is there always a warning?
I think some people are contact experiencers and they're having a hard time of it. The free study, which I mentioned, 4,000 contact experiencers, they asked hundreds of questions, and about 10 to 15% of the people who are involved with the phenomena are having bad experiences, frightening. They would like about 10% would like it to stop. But what we noticed was that as the number of contacts increased, the percentage of people who said it was the worst experience of their life or they wanted to stop decreased. So a lot of the terror that exists for
Hmm.
contact experiences is what's called ontological shock, where the phenomenon is so strange and the beings appear unannounced that it's absolutely terrifying.
Okay,
Um, there are biological sampling that goes on, but many people, once they get over the terror, can actually cooperate with the so-called extraterrestrials who continue to visit them, and they can turn what initially was terrifying and negative into a more positive exchange.
understood. Serious question. Do dragons exist?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. We're glad we cleared that up because if anyone would know, it would have to be you.
Oh, sure.
All right. Except for our cat. I call her our furry dragon. She exists. So, all right, Dr. Burkes, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Coffee and UFOs. Thank you all for joining us again for Brew of Strangeness. Please subscribe, like down below, comment, and share. And if you'd like to become a Patreon supporter, the link is down below in the description. Peace and love, and we'll catch you next time.